Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back nearly 1,000 years to a time before alarms, before coffee, before plumbing, and right into the raw chill of a medieval morning. You open your eyes in a narrow bed, stuffed with straw, wrapped in scratchy wool. And your first thought is that you probably won't survive this century without a miracle. The room smells faintly of smoke, hay, and last night's stew. Outside, a bell clangs in the distance, the sound of the church calling everyone to prayer or to work, depending on your luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull yourself upright, joints creaking like the hinges of an old chest. Your breath clouds the air. The single window in the wall is just a hole covered with oiled parchment. Sunlight squeezes through it like a weak candle. You hear chickens scratching below, a dog barking somewhere, and the faint hum of a woman singing as she churns butter. Morning in the medieval world doesn't ease you awake, drags you into motion. The first thing you notice is the cold. There's no central heating, no electric blanket, no warm cup waiting by your bedside. Firewood is precious, and you're lucky if there's even a tiny ember left in the hearth. So you tug on your clothes from the night before, because yes, you sleep in the mand, hope the fleas have grown bored of you. Historians still argue whether medieval people bathed more often than we give them credit for. But one thing's certain. Hygiene was a game of endurance. Downstairs, the household is already alive. A servant stokes the fire. A child tends to the goats. The smell of coarse bread baking reminds you that life runs onto things, faith, and flour. You join in the silent rhythm of the morning. Shake out the straw mattress, sweep the dirt floor, and empty the chamber pot into the alley. That last task alone is enough to wake you up faster than caffeine ever could. The church bell rings again. It's called the Matins bell, summoning early prayers. For the devout, every sound from that bell tower marks a part of the day. Matins before dawn. Lauds at sunrise, then prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. Time, in this world, isn't told by numbers, it's measured in prayers. Your whole existence ticks by according to faith, not clocks. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside. The air bites, and your breath rises like smoke. The ground is slick with frost, the kind that turns grass into glass. The streets, if you can call them that, tar little more than packed mud and straw. You share the space with pigs rooting for scraps, geese squawking at nothing, and a few bleary neighbors trudging toward the fields. A man hauling water from the well greets you with a grunt. He's wearing hose patched with rough wool and shoes made of stitched leather that squeak when wet. You nod back and suddenly realize this is the pulse of survival. Every person around you is awake before dawn, not out of ambition, but necessity. You work when it's light because candles are too expensive to waste. The smell of smoke grows stronger. A baker has started his ovens, and his apprentice is already covered in flour, yawning as he shoves loaves into the heat. He glances at you, eyes rimmed with soot, and mumbles something that sounds like a curse or a prayer, hard to tell which. You laugh quietly. The medieval morning doesn't distinguish between holiness and exhaustion. Inside your small cottage, breakfast is more about filling your stomach than pleasing your taste buds. A bowl of pottage, basically yesterday's leftovers, boiled again with barley or oats, sits steaming on the table. It's earthy, bland, but warm. A small hunk of black bread, maybe a piece of cheese if you're lucky, completes the feast. And of course, a cup of weak ale. Everyone drinks ale, even the children. Water isn't safe. It's full of bacteria from the same river people wash and, well, relieve themselves in. So if you're sipping your fancy filtered water right now, congratulations, you're already living better than a medieval lord. You take a bite of the bread. It's heavy, dark, flecked with bits of husk. Teeth were precious back then, and this bread could crack one in half. But it's yours, baked in the communal oven down the lane. Villagers took turns using that great oven, each paying a small fee or trading grain. If you tried to bake in secret, you risked a fine or worse, a scolding from the reeve, who knows everyone's business. As you eat, the world around you stirs. Smoke curls from rooftops, oxen snort in the fields, and the rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer begins to echo from the edge of the village. That sound, metal on metal, is the medieval version of an alarm clock. It means the day has truly begun. You glance toward the manor house on the hill. The lord and lady are probably just waking, still wrapped in embroidered sheets, with servants lighting their hearths and fetching their wash water. Nobles might sleep later, but their mornings are far from idle. Each one has its own dance of etiquette, prayers, and endless layering of garments. Meanwhile, you're already halfway to the fields with a hoe on your shoulder, wondering if you'll ever see a coin this week. Still, there's comfort in the routine. As the sun climbs, warmth finally touches your fingers. Birds wheel above the thatched roofs, and the church tower casts its long shadow across the green. The scent of manure mixes with wild herbs, lavender, thyme, and rosemary, which villagers hang by the door to keep away bad airs. You can't help but smile at the irony. They didn't know about germs, but their superstitions accidentally made things a bit cleaner. A quick note for the historians listening: yes, there are records of people brushing their teeth with rough linen or mint leaves and washing with cold water and lye soap. But most mornings, that's a luxury. You splash your face, call it good enough, and move on. One quirky custom that always stands out: medieval people often slept in 2 shifts. The first sleep lasted until midnight. Then people woke up, prayed, chatted, maybe even visited neighbors. Before returning for their second sleep, imagine scrolling medieval TikTok in the dark, except instead of phones. You'd share ghost stories or whisper your sins. Strangely relatable. The human brain hasn't changed much in 1,000 years. You finish your bowl and glance at the door. It's time to work. Whether you're a peasant or an apprentice, the morning hours are precious. The sun determines your paycheck, or rather, your survival. You grab your tool's rough wooden handles, worn smooth by generations, step into the world again. The fields stretch before you like a patchwork quilt, stitched with hedgerows, dotted with scarecrows, and humming with bees. As you trudge toward them, the sound of distant chanting floats over the hill. The monks in the nearby priory are beginning their morning prayers. Their life is another rhythm, entirely waking at dawn, eating in silence, copying manuscripts until their fingers cramp. Historians still argue whether monastic life was peaceful devotion or well-disguised punishment. Either way, those bells keep the entire countryside in sync. You pass the village well, where women draw water, gossiping with quick hands and quicker tongues. Someone mentions a lost chicken, another complains about the reeve's taxes, and before you know it, a story about a ghost in the woods spreads like wildfire. It's community journalism, medieval edition. A few steps later, a barefoot boy races past, laughing as he chases a piglet through the mud. You dodge just in time, muttering something under your breath that would probably earn you a fine from the church if said too loudly. But laughter breaks through, it's infectious, and somehow, despite the dirt and the hunger, this place feels alive. You reach the edge of the field. The ground is hard from the night frost, and the first swing of your hoe sends a shock through your arm. You settle into the rhythm dig. Lift, breathe, repeat. The sound of your breath and the distant crow of a rooster blend into a kind of music. It's labor, yes, but it's also meditation. Every movement keeps you tethered to the earth and to survival itself. Hours later, when the sun sits high, you pause to wipe sweat from your brow. The world smells of turned soil and damp grass. You realize that, somehow, this life, gritty, exhausting, relentless, is also strangely beautiful. There's honesty in it, no pretenses, no deadlines, no inbox, just daylight and duty. Somewhere in the distance, another bell rings time for a break. You stretch your aching back, take a sip of ale from your leather flask, and look around at your companions, bent over in rows like silent prayers. One grins at you, missing 2 teeth, and says, "Another fine morning, eh?" You laugh, because in a world like this, surviving till noon is reason enough to celebrate. The clouds drift lazily overhead. A hawk circles. The land hums quietly beneath your feet. You feel the steady heartbeat of the Middle Ages pulsing through every sound, every breath, every scrape of hoe against earth. This is morning simple, brutal, unfiltered. And somehow, you're still here, alive, hungry, ready for whatever the day will throw your way. By the time your stomach begins to growl again, the sun is well above the thatched rooftops, and that means one thing: food, or at least something vaguely resembling it. The work has already warmed you from the inside, but that tiny spark of hunger is constant, an uninvited companion that follows every medieval life from cradle to grave. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which doesn't make them cleaner, but at least feels like progress, and start heading back toward the village. The air smells of smoke and baking bread, a scent that feels almost holy. You pass the baker's hut again, where the oven glows like the mouth of a volcano. Inside, round loaves puff and crackle, dusted with flour so fine it looks like mist. Bread isn't just food, it's a symbol, a currency, a miracle of yeast and hope. Without it, life simply doesn't move forward. You duck inside your cottage, greeted by the comforting clatter of pottery. Your household's main meal of the day is about to begin, dinner, which confusingly happens closer to noon. Supper will come later, smaller and quieter, after the sun sets. But right now, everyone gathers for this shared pause in the long stretch of labor. The table isn't much just rough planks resting on trestles, but it holds the heart of the home. On it sits a pot of pottage simmering with whatever survived the pantry raid this morning. Barley, peas, onions, maybe a stray bit of bacon fat if fortune smiled. Each spoonful tastes of earth and smoke and the comfort of repetition. You don't question it. You just eat. Beside the pot sits a small jug of ale. It's light, barely stronger than modern soda, brewed from barley and flavored with herbs or honey. Children drink it too, because again, water is an unpredictable gamble. You raise your mug, take a long gulp, and for a fleeting moment, life feels generous. The ale is faintly sweet, bubbling against your tongue, a small rebellion against the blandness of survival. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were healthier than ours, and it's an oddly fascinating debate. On one hand, meals were simple, low in sugar, and packed with whole grains. On the other, famine and malnutrition were always a sneeze away. You, personally, are just glad your stew doesn't bite back. You glance at your companions, your neighbors, family, maybe a passing traveler seated at the edge of the bench. Meals aren't private, they're social glue. Everyone eats together, talking between mouthfuls about weather, crops, and the endless taxes demanded by the Lord. Someone cracks a joke about how the Lord's horse eats better than half the village. Laughter ripples through the room. It's true, but what can you do? Even sarcasm feels nourishing. Bread is passed around next, torn by hand, dipped into the pottage, and shared. No plates, no forks, just fingers, and a communal bowl. Spoons are wooden and sometimes shared, too. If you drop yours, you wipe it on your sleeve and carry on. Germs aren't part of the vocabulary yet. Life is too short to fear what you can't see. A knock at the door interrupts the rhythm. It's the reeve, the man responsible for enforcing the Lord's laws. His face is pink with self-importance, and he eyes your pot as though it owes him something. You offer him a piece of bread, the polite tax of survival, and he accepts it with a sniff. "All's well," he asks. You nod. "All's well." You lie. When he leaves, you release the breath you didn't realize you were holding. The rhythm resumes. Food in the medieval world isn't just sustenance, it's storytelling. Each bite tells where you belong in the social order. A noble's table, for example, looks like a theater of power. Their meals might stretch for hours, filled with roasted swans, gilded pies, and spices worth more than gold. Even the colors of food, mattered brightly dyed sauces and sweetmeats, showed off wealth. Meanwhile, your humble stew tells a quieter story, but it's still life, and that's a kind of victory. You scrape the last of the pottage from your bowl with a chunk of bread, soaking up the thick broth. The fire pops in the hearth. For dessert, if you can call it that, there's a small piece of apple, maybe dried last autumn. You chew it slowly, savoring the burst of tart sweetness. Somewhere outside, a cockerel crows, confused about the time. You laugh softly. He asks like every coworker who shows up late, but acts like he has been there all along. After eating, the table is cleared with minimal fuss. Dogs lick crumbs from the floor. The pot is rinsed with ale or leftover water and left by the fire to dry. There's no soap in sight, just ashes, grit, and elbow grease. Yet somehow, everything manages to survive another day. You step outside again, full but never quite satisfied. The village hums with its post-meal energy. Children chase each other, merchants pull carts down the lane, and someone's already shouting about stolen eggs. The market square beckons, a muddy open space lined with wooden stalls, the beating heart of medieval trade. You follow the noise. The closer you get, the stronger the smells. Smoked fish, fresh hay, tanned leather, and a faint undercurrent of something suspiciously like goat. It's chaos in harmony. Chickens dart between feet. A woman haggles over onions. A man plays a fiddle for tips. His tune's slightly out of tune, but good-natured. Here, you see the real economy at work, not coins and ledgers, but barter and trust. You might trade a sack of grain for a pair of shoes, or a jug of ale for a handful of salt. People know each other's faces more than their names, and reputation is currency. One bad deal can haunt a family for generations. A baker waves you over. Fresh loaves, half price before Vespers. He calls. You grin, remembering his flour-covered face from dawn. You buy one still warm, crusty, smelling like heaven, and bite in as you walk. The outside crackles, the inside steams. For a second, you forget how rough life can be. You pass a group of traveling merchants with bright fabrics slung over their arms. Silk from the East, they claim, and pepper from lands beyond imagination. You can't afford it, of course, but you stop to touch the fabric anyway. It's smooth as a sigh. Careful, the merchant says with a grin. Looking's free, touching's extra. You chuckle and move on before temptation wins. A commotion rises at the far end of the market. Pickpocket has been caught, a boy no older than 13, clutching a stolen coin. The crowd gathers fast, voices overlapping, judgments flying. Some shout for mercy, others for punishment. Historians still argue whether medieval justice leaned more toward cruelty or deterrence, but either way, the boy's trembling says enough. The reeve steps in, grabs his ear, and drags him away. The market exhales as quickly as it gasped. You linger a moment, the taste of bread suddenly dull. Then, with a shrug, you keep walking. Life goes on. A jester in a patchwork outfit juggles apples near the tavern, singing a song about a drunken knight who lost his horse and his dignity. You toss him a crust of bread, and he bows dramatically. Generous traveler. He cries, "May your fleas die before winter." You grin. A blessing's a blessing. The tavern smells of sweat and spilled ale, but it's the heart of laughter. You step inside briefly, just to feel the warmth. The air is thick with chatter and the rhythmic beat of a botron drum. In one corner, two farmers argue over whose cow produces better milk. In another, a merchant flirts poorly with the innkeeper's daughter. She rolls her eyes, but smiles anyway. You take a sip of ale, thicker this time, with a hint of honey. The room buzzes like a hive. Meals here aren't about nutrition. They're about belonging. Even in hard times, people crave the same thing they always have: connection. As afternoon tilts toward evening, you step back outside. The market is winding down. Stalls close, carts creak away, and the smell of roasting meat drifts through the cooling air. You pass a butcher's stand where sausages hang like strange decorations. He's sweeping up scraps for the dogs. You wave, and he nods, muttering something about tomorrow's stew. The path home is golden with sunset. Villagers head back with baskets, voices low, the day's noise softening into peace. You carry your small loaf under your arm, still warm against your ribs. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings again, marking another prayer, another hour gone. You glance at the fading sky, streaked with orange and violet. The fields glow, the thatched roofs gleam, and you realize that despite the hardships, there's a rhythm here that feels almost holy. Every meal, every shared laugh, every scrap of bread is a triumph against hunger and time itself. You smile, wiping a crumb from your chin. Bread, broth, and beer. You murmur to yourself, "I guess that's all a soul really needs." And just as the bell tolls once more, you turn toward home. Your footsteps light, your belly full, and your heart against all odds content. You rise from your bench and step back into the waning daylight, drawn once more toward the hum of the market square. The afternoon carries a golden haze, now sunlight falling through wood smoke and the dust kicked up by 100 boots. It's here that medieval life beats its loudest, its dirtiest, and if you squint through the chaos, it's most human. The air buzzes with noise, the clop of hooves, the shrill cries of vendors, the laughter of children darting between carts. Somewhere, a dog barks furiously at a goose twice its size. You tighten your cloak against the breeze and step into the thick of it, where smells of fish, ale, and wet wool collide into something both revolting and oddly comforting. A woman calls out, "Apples, sweet as sin and cheaper than prayer." You can't help but laugh. Her hands are red from the cold, her smile missing a tooth, but her energy could outshine a bishop's sermon. You buy one apple, hand her a coin, and she winks. "Careful," she says. That one might bite back. The medieval market isn't just a place to buy and sell, it's a living theater. Every sound, every smell, every sidelong glance carries meaning. Here, you trade not only goods but stories, reputations, and sometimes insults. A tailor argues with a shepherd over the price of wool. A brewer boasts that his ale could raise the dead. You don't doubt it, his breath alone might do the trick. You wander past a spice merchant whose stall gleams with wonder. Tiny sacks of saffron, cinnamon, and black pepper, all more precious than silver. He sees your awed expression and leans forward conspiratorially. "Straight from Alexandria," he whispers. "By way of Venice?" You nod, though you suspect it's more likely straight from the next town over. Still, his patter is part of the magic. Historians still argue whether such medieval markets were the beginnings of capitalism or just elaborate gossip hubs. Either way, you feel it: the buzz of trade, the electricity of exchange, the unspoken thrill that something is happening here, something that moves the world one coin at a time. You notice a crowd forming near a raised platform. Curiosity wins, and you edge closer. A man in bright clothes, a town crier, raises a rolled parchment. By order of his lordship, he bellows. The market toll increases by 1 farthing per cart. Groans ripple through the crowd. Someone mutters a curse under their breath. The crier doesn't flinch. He's heard worse. Taxes are as eternal as hunger. Behind you, a juggler tosses 3 wooden balls into the air. "Cheer up," he calls. Could be worse. You could be the jester who dropped the king's wine. A burst of laughter follows, half relief, half resignation. The juggler bows low and tips his hat for coins. You weave through the stalls again, pausing at the fishmonger stand. He's surrounded by buckets of eels, carp, and something that looks suspiciously like it once had legs. The smell is historic. He grins. Fresh from the river this morning, he declares proudly. You nod, deciding that fresh is a generous word. The church forbids meat on Fridays, so fish keeps the soul safe, if not the stomach. Near the edge of the square, a scribe has set up shop with quill, ink, and parchment. He's hunched over, writing a letter for a woman who can't read or write. My dearest son, she dictates, I hope the plague has not reached your village yet. You glance away politely. Letters are rare, expensive, and often tragic. The scribe's hand moves carefully. Each word could outlive the person who speaks it. A donkey brays behind you, and you turn to see a young man loading sacks of grain. The poor beast looks unimpressed with its fate. Hard day, you ask. The man grins. Aye, he says, but better than the miller's apprentice. He got his hand caught in the wheel last week. You wince. He nods solemnly. Still, the ale was good at his wake. Dark humor, you realize, is a survival skill here. When death hovers so close, laughter becomes armor. You drift toward the tavern, following the scent of roasted meat and the echo of a lute. Inside, the air is thick with warmth and noise. Tables are crowded with merchants, farmers, and a few shady types whose coin purses seem heavier than their consciences. A bard strums in the corner, singing a bawdy tune about a knight, a nun, and a goatan unlikely trio that earns roaring laughter. You find a place near the wall and sip ale. The foam clings to your lip, and the flavor is sharp, tangy, alive. A woman beside you introduces herself as Agnes, the tanner's wife. She gestures to her hands brown, strong, calloused. Smells don't wash out, she says proudly. But neither does honesty. You nod, admiring her spirit. She laughs, slaps your shoulder, and returns to her friends. It's strange beneath the roughness. There's community. Everyone knows everyone. Secrets may not stay hidden, but neither does kindness. When someone loses a cow, neighbors help search. When a child falls ill, the whole street whispers prayers. The world is fragile here, so people hold it together with shared breath and borrowed hope. A sudden shout interrupts the hum. A dispute erupts. A farmer accusing a merchant of shorting him on flour. You and half the tavern spill out to watch. The argument escalates fast. Fists ball, voices rise. A constable appears, puffed up with authority, and wedges himself between them. Peace, by God's bones. A coup, he yells. The crowd laughs. It's always a spectacle when tempers flare. Eventually, both men are dragged off to cool down, probably over another mug of ale. One older man beside you mutters, "Same every market day. Next week, they'll drink together again." You believe him. You return to wandering the stalls, the day slipping gently toward evening. A baker's boy is selling leftover rolls cheap. You buy one and hand him an extra coin. He stares, surprised. "Ah, God bless you," he says. You smile. "I'll need it," you answer. Somewhere nearby, a priest is preaching atop a crate. His voice carries above the din. Beware of greed. Beware of the devil's gold. Ironically, his collection plate fills steadily. A woman beside you whispers, "He says that every week." Then buys the best wine in town. You both stifle laughter. As the sun dips lower, torches are lit. Their flickering light paints every face with a soft, molten glow. You realize the market is not just commerce, it's rhythm, the heartbeat of the community. It's where stories begin, lovers meet, debts are made, and sometimes fate changes hands. For a moment, the hardships vanish. There's just music, motion, and the scent of roasting chestnuts. You buy a handful of those chestnuts, hot enough to burn your palm, and sit on a low wall to watch the scene unfold. A mother scolds her son for climbing a barrel. A merchant counts coins by candlelight. A beggar hums softly to his dog. This isn't a reenactment's life, vivid and unfiltered. One fringe custom you overhear makes you blink. A man swears his cow's milk soured because a witch looked at it wrong. He swears he'll hang a rowan branch above the barn to ward her off. You don't argue. In this world, superstition is science with better storytelling. The sky deepens to violet. The market thins. Stalls close. Gates creak. And the last merchants roll their carts away, wheels crunching softly on the frozen ground. The noise fades into a lullaby of clinking harnesses and murmured prayers. You stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic, and take one last look around. For all its grime and gossip, the market is the village's soul. Without it, the world would go silent. You think of the woman selling apples, the boy with his chestnuts, the scribe bent over his ink, every one of them holding their place in this fragile, noisy ecosystem of survival. The final bell rings from the church tower, deep and resonant. People cross themselves automatically, a reflex learned from birth. You do it too, not out of faith perhaps, but out of habit, a small gesture to keep the darkness polite. You turn toward home as torches flicker in the distance. The smell of the daybread, fish, smoke, sweat clings to your clothes. Somewhere, a voice sings softly in Latin, floating over rooftops like a prayer carried by the wind. You pause, listening, then smile. The medieval world is filthy, brutal, beautiful land, entirely alive. And as you walk back through the cooling air, you realize the market isn't just a place you visit. It's a mirror showing you, in its chaos and charm, what humanity has always been: hungry, hopeful, and endlessly trading one story for another. By the time you make your way toward the hill where the Lord's Manor stands, the world below feels distant, muddy, loud, and human. Up here, everything slows. The air smells different, sharper, tinged with pine and chimney smoke instead of manure. The path winds between hedges trimmed too neatly to be natural. And for a moment, you could almost believe you've stepped into another reality. You approach the castle gate, where two guards lean on their spears, half bored and half freezing. One raises an eyebrow as you pass. "Business?" he asks. You mumble something about delivering bread. He grunts, waves you through, and you step beneath the portcullis's heavy iron teeth that could drop and trap you in an instant. The sound of your boots echoes on the stone. Welcome to the fortress heart of medieval power. Inside the courtyard, life thrums in its own carefully orchestrated chaos. A stable boy leads horses toward the stables, their breath steaming in the cold. A cook's apprentice hauls a basket of onions so large it could feed half the village, or make them all cry, trying. Servants move like clockwork, each step practiced, each word measured. You realize quickly, every motion here is performance. The Lord might not be watching, but he could be, and that's enough. The manor itself looms ahead, its walls streaked with soot from countless winters. Light spills through narrow stained glass windows, painting the rush-strewn floor in fractured color. A fire roars in the central hearth, its smoke curling toward the beams above. The smell of roasted meat, beeswax, and humanity blends into something strangely intoxicating. You're greeted by a steward, a thin man with an expression permanently set between politeness and suspicion. "Bread delivery?" he asks. You nod. He inspects the loaves like a jeweler appraising diamonds. "Set them by the table," he says. "And mind the rush," says they're fresh. You glance down. The floor is in bare stone, but covered in a layer of dried reeds and herbs, mint, lavender, sometimes even rosemary, to mask the less pleasant smells of the household. You can almost imagine it works. Almost. A small dog scampers past, chasing a bit of bone. Behind it, a maid hurries after, muttering about his lordship's beast. You can't help but grin. Even in castles, chaos has a seat at the table. The great hall serves as dining room, courtroom, and living room all in one. It's the beating heart of the estate. At the far end, a raised platform, the high table, awaits the lord and his family. Below, rows of benches will soon fill with knights, squires, and whoever else has managed to stay in the lord's favor this week. You remember hearing that a misplaced bow or poorly timed jest could end a career war, a life faster than bad ale. Historians still argue whether medieval nobles were refined patrons or glorified warlords with better laundry service. Judging by the look of the tapestries each, one depicting heroic hunts and bloody battles, you're leaning toward the latter. You step aside as a group of servants enters carrying trays piled high with meat, pheasants, rabbits, and something that might once have been a swan. The scent is dizzying. "Kitchen's been at it since dawn," one of them mutters. "Hope he notices this time." You raise an eyebrow. "Who?" "The Lord," she whispers, glancing nervously toward the dais. "If he doesn't like the roast again, he'll have us skimming broth till Christmas." The tension in this place is invisible, but everywhere woven between every bow. Every word of "my lord." Even laughter sounds cautious, as though it has to ask permission first. You spot a jester perched on a stool near the fire, practicing faces in a polished cup. His bells jingle softly. He catches your eye and winks. "Careful," he murmurs. "Don't smile too wide. They might think you're plotting something." You suppress a laugh. He's probably not wrong. Dinner preparations reach a crescendo as the doors open and the household assembles. Trumpets blare a few notes flat, but no one dares mention it. The Lord strides in, cloak sweeping, rings glinting like tiny suns. He's broad, confident, and radiates the kind of authority that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Behind him, the lady of the manor glides in, her gown heavy with embroidery. Her face is calm, but her eyes are sharp enough to slice bread. You bow instinctively, head low. She passes, and you catch a whisper of rose oil and cold iron. The meal begins with ceremony bordering on theater. Grace is said by the chaplain, his Latin droning like distant thunder. Platters parade through the hall roast meats, spiced pies, trenchers of bread acting as both plate and sponge. A boy with a pitcher pours wine into silver cups. You're offered a seat at the lower end of the table, among the servants and stable hands. It's still more luxury than most villagers will ever see. You tear into your bread, dip it into a gravy so rich it almost feels sinful, and try not to look too hungry. At the high table, conversation flows like wine. Talk of hunting, taxes, and the latest scandal from the royal court. One knight boasts of killing a boar the size of a horse. The jester mutters, "Pity he didn't marry it instead," and nearly gets a chicken bone thrown at his head. A bard begins to play a harp, his fingers delicate against the strings. The music softens the air, and for a moment, even the Lord's stern face relaxes. You close your eyes and let the melody drift through the smoke and candlelight. It's hauntingly beautiful reminder that even in a world of mud and swords, art still breathes. One of the servants leans close. "They say the Lord dreams of building a stone chapel," she whispers. "Wants his soul insured before he dies." You nod. Everyone in this world is one fever away from eternity. The church sells salvation. The lords just pay premium rates. Midway through the meal, the lady claps her hands for silence. A messenger steps forward, holding a scroll sealed with wax. His voice trembles slightly as he reads news from the king. New levies, new wars, new costs. Groans ripple down the table like a wave. The Lord slams his goblet down hard enough to spill wine. "We fight again," he growls. "And who pays?" "We do." You can feel the air tighten like a drawn bowstring. For a heartbeat, the room is silent except for the fire. Then the jester pipes up, voice trembling but brave. "At least, my lord, war's good for business. Keeps the gravediggers honest." Laughter bursts relieved, nervous, real. Even the Lord smirks, shaking his head. "You'll dig your own grave with that tongue," he warns. The jester bows deeply. "Then I'll make sure it's level, my lord." Humor, you realize, is its own armor here. As dishes are cleared, sweetmeats appear, honeyed almonds, small cakes, fruits soaked in wine. The richness makes your head spin. You think of the villagers below, eating their humble pottage by firelight. Can't help but feel the gulf between these worlds. Yet both depend on each other. Their sweat fuels this feast, and this feast justifies their sweat. The final course arrives, a spectacle of roasted peacock, feathers reattached for display. It's magnificent and absurd. You catch the jester's eye again. He mouths the word overcooked. You choke back laughter just in time. As the feast winds down, minstrels take over, filling the hall with song. Servants clear bones and trenchers. Dogs dart in for scraps, and someone starts a low game of dice near the wall. The air is thick with warmth and the faint haze of spilled wine. Later, when the lord and lady retire, the hall begins to exhale. The tension melts. Servants laugh more freely now, swapping bits of gossip as they work. One young maid tells a story about a ghost in the cellar, a monk, who appears whenever the wine casks run low. "I'd haunt this place too," someone mutters, "if I had to pour for this lot." Historians still argue whether castles were centers of culture or just fortified egos. But sitting here, you sense both. There's grandeur, yes, but also grit. Behind every polished goblet is a hand that scrubbed it raw. Behind every title, a dozen backs that bent to hold it up. You step outside for air. The night is cold, stars bright enough to touch. The courtyard glows with torchlight, and the distant hills fade into shadow. From somewhere inside the manor, faint music drifts through the open window, soft lullaby played on the harp. You listen for a moment, the sound mingling with the crackle of the torches. A guard nods to you. "Fine night," he says. You agree? Then, half to himself, he adds, "Quiet, too quiet, always means trouble's thinking." You glance at him, unsure whether to laugh or worry. You leave the manor behind, the echo of its wealth still clinging to your clothes. Down the hill, the village twinkles with firelight, humble, uneven, alive. For all the castle's grandeur, you find yourself missing that muddy warmth already. Power may live behind walls, but life hums outside them. As your boots crunch over the frozen path, you look back one last time. The great hall's windows flicker like eyes, watching the dark. Somewhere inside, the Lord dreams of glory, the servants of freedom, the jester of tomorrow's punchline. And you? You just dream of a warm bed that doesn't bite back. The chill of the castle lingers in your bones as you wander back down toward the village. The morning mist has burned away, revealing a patchwork of fields, thatched roofs, and thin curls of smoke rising into the sky. The air hums faintly, with activity hose striking soil, hens clucking, laughter spilling from somewhere unseen. Down here, life beats slower, earthier, and infinitely more familiar. You cross the wooden bridge over the stream, the water glinting in the late afternoon sun. Beneath it, children crouch with nets, scooping for minnows, their bare feet muddy and cold. One of them glances up, squinting against the light, and grins a gap-toothed grin. "Want to trade, stranger?" To fish for a story. You laugh softly. In this place, stories are currency, and gossip is gold. You pass a row of cottages, their walls made of wattle and daub, patched with care and desperation. The smell of wood smoke and wet hay hangs heavy in the air. At one doorway, an old woman plucks feathers from a chicken, tossing them into the wind like confetti. "A feast tonight!" she calls out cheerfully. If the cat doesn't get there first, her eyes twinkle. You nod politely, secretly hoping she means an actual cat and not some local euphemism for her husband. The village green is the heart of everything Wellpart's marketplace, stage, and social battlefield. Here, disputes are aired, games are played, and alliances are forged over ale and accidents. A blacksmith's hammer rings from the edge of the square, a rhythm so steady it feels like the heartbeat of the community. Sparks burst from his anvil in tiny golden flares, and every strike smells faintly of metal and sweat. Nearby, a group of women churn butter together, arms moving in perfect synchronization. They gossip as they work, Their voices low, but not low enough. "Did you hear about the miller's wife?" one asks. "Ran off with the priest's nephew?" The others gasp, then immediately lean closer. Historians still argue whether medieval gossip was malicious or necessary social glue. You think? Watching them grin over a shared scandal? Either way, it's as vital as bread. At the tavern door, the sign creaks in the wind, a crudely painted boar's head, eyes crossed in perpetual intoxication. You duck inside, drawn by warmth and noise. The interior is dim, smoky, and alive. A fire crackles at the hearth, and men huddle around it, tankards in hand. The ale smells sharp and sour, but judging by the laughter, it's doing its job. You slide onto a bench beside a farmer who's already halfway to cheerful oblivion. "You're new," he slurs with a friendly smile. "Don't worry, we all start sober." You raise an imaginary cup. "Then I'm behind already." The table erupts in laughter. Someone pounds your back hard enough to test your spine's loyalty. The innkeeper, stout woman with forearms like tree trunks, sets down a bowl of stew. "How special?" she says. "Mostly vegetables, maybe rabbit?" You hesitate. "Maybe?" She shrugs. "Depends how fast the dog was today." You decide not to ask further questions. Between bites, you listen. The talk flows freely. Crop yields, taxes, saints, storms, and the local lord's latest eccentricities. "He's building a fish pond," one man grumbles. "A pond," says it's for fasting days. "Meanwhile, my roof leaks faster than his sermons." The others nod. "We'll all drown in holy water one day," someone mutters. You notice a boy near the door tuning a fiddle. His clothes are simple, his smile quick. When he begins to play, the tavern shifts, feet tapping, shoulders swaying. The melody is rough but joyous, like laughter set to rhythm. You find yourself clapping along, forgetting for a moment that this world is centuries away from yours. When the music fades, an old man in a faded cloak leans closer to the fire. "You've heard of the fairy lights, haven't you?" he asks the room. A hush falls, out past the marsh. "Folks say they dance before storms. Follow them too far and you'll never come back." Someone scoffs. "That's just swamp gas." The old man smiles. "That's what the dead say too." A ripple of nervous laughter moves through the room. You realize that for all their practicality, medieval villagers live side by side with the unseen. Saints, spirits, curses, they're all part of the daily conversation. Fear isn't an interruption here. It's a companion. You half expect to see something flicker in the firelight yourself. Later, you step outside, the cool air washing away the heat of the tavern. Dusk paints the village in blue and gold. You hear the faint strains of the fiddle drifting out the door, mingling with the smell of bread baking somewhere down the lane. A cat slinks between your legs, tail high and unbothered by centuries of superstition. You wander toward the edge of the green, where a circle of children skip around a small maypole, singing in shrill voices. "Ring around the roses." The tune is familiar, and for a fleeting moment, eerily prophetic. You remember that centuries later, such songs would become tied to darker memories, the plague, the ashes, the fall. But for now, it's just laughter and spinning skirts. Across the field, a young couple steals a moment behind a haystack. You pretend not to see, though their giggles make it obvious. Love here is both public and private, whispered promises, arranged marriages, and festivals that often blur one into the other. Courtship, like everything else, has its rules. A shared dance, a gift of lace or ribbon, a stolen glance that might bloom into scandal. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were matters of duty or desire, you recall? Watching the pair vanish into the twilight, you suspect the answer is both. The village bell tolls, calling for evening prayers. Doors open, voices rise, and people drift toward the small stone church at the end of the lane. You follow, drawn by the glow of candlelight. Inside, the air smells of wax and damp stone. A single crucifix hangs above the altar, its carved Christ watching over the crowd with solemn patience. The priest, thin, tired, and probably younger than he looks, leads the prayer in Latin, words flowing like water. You don't understand them all, but the rhythm alone feels sacred. Beside you, a farmer crosses himself with reverent clumsiness. A child fidgets. Someone sneezes, and half the congregation murmurs, "God bless you," as if the sneeze itself might invite spirits. You hide a smile. Faith and fear often share the same pew. After prayers, villagers linger outside, chatting softly under the fading sky. A woman sells candles shaped like saints. A boy chases fireflies with the seriousness of a hunter. Somewhere, a cow lows in complaint, demanding its bedtime attention. Life, you realize, is layered here, ritual atop routine, superstition atop necessity. As darkness deepens, a man lights a small bonfire on the green. For warmth, he says, though everyone knows it's also for luck. People gather around, tossing in bits of dried herbs, muttering half prayers. A spark leaps high, and someone jokes. "Careful, last time, we summoned rain instead of blessings." Laughter ripples through the crowd. Even fear, when shared, becomes oddly comforting. You settle near the fire, watching faces glow and fade with the flames. A woman passes you a small wooden cup of cider. It's warm, sweet, and spiced with something faintly mysterious. "Two good harvests," she says, "and fewer fleas." You clink cups in silent agreement. The night grows softer. The stars emerge one by one, unhurried. The fire crackles, casting shifting shadows across the faces around you. Someone begins to hum an old tune, low, haunting, almost a lullaby. Gradually, voices join in, until the whole circle is singing. You don't know the words, but you feel them. They're heavy with gratitude and grief, joy and endurance. For a while, you simply listen, wrapped in the sound and the scent of smoke. This is the real heartbeat of medieval life, not the kings or castles, but these moments shared under the same stars, where laughter, fear, and music mingle like sparks. When the song ends, the crowd disperses slowly, drifting homeward. You stand alone by the dying fire, the embers pulsing faintly like the last breaths of the day. In the distance, an owl calls. The fields sigh. And you realize, tomorrow will look almost exactly like today's. Somehow, no one here seems to mind. The last embers of the village bonfire fade into the night as you follow the winding path toward the small stone chapel on the hill. The air feels heavier here, thick with the scent of incense and damp earth. You can hear the faint toll of the church bell, slow, solemn, and hauntingly regular. Every sound in the dark seems sharper, every shadow deeper. In the medieval world, faith doesn't simply live in the heart, it saturates the air, seeps into the soil, and curls beneath every thought like smoke under a door. You step into the chapel's courtyard. A graveyard lies beside it, crooked crosses jutting out of the earth like broken teeth. Someone has left a small loaf of bread on one of the stones, an offering for a lost soul, or maybe just a midnight snack for the brave. You pause, unsure whether to laugh or whisper a prayer. In this world, the line between reverence and fear is razor thin. Inside the chapel, candlelight flickers against the cold stone walls. The glow paints the saints' faces in molten gold and shadow, their glass eyes watching as if measuring your faith or your guilt. A priest kneels before the altar, whispering Latin so softly that it sounds more like breathing than speech. The smell of beeswax and myrrh fills your lungs. It's oddly comforting and unnerving all at once. Faith rules everything here. From the cradle to the grave, every heartbeat is wrapped in ritual. You are baptized before you can even remember your name, confess sins you barely understand, and hope to die on the right side of the priest's blessing. People don't just believe in God, they breathe Him. Every illness, every storm, every good harvest is read like a message from heaven. You slide into a pew, watching as villagers shuffle in. A mother bows her head so low her forehead nearly touches the wood. Beside her, a boy sneaks glances toward the candle flames, clearly wishing he could play with them. The priest rises, turning toward the congregation. Dominus vobiscum, he intones. The reply comes in a soft murmur. Et cum spiritu. You don't understand every word, but the cadence is hypnotic. It's less a conversation than a spell intuned, practiced, and impossibly steady. The rhythm lulls you, like waves against the shore. Historians still argue whether faith in the Middle Ages was a comfort or a cage. Watching the bowed heads around you, you can see it's both. It holds the world together, but also holds it still. You can't question it not if you value your soul or your skin. After the Mass, people drift outside again, quieter now, softer in their movements as though the air itself demands reverence. You overhear snippets of conversation, a farmer asking for a saint's intercession for his sick cow, a mother whispering thanks for a child's recovery. A young man muttering about bad luck, convinced he's been cursed by his jealous neighbor. Everyone's misfortune finds its cause in the supernatural. You can't simply be clumsy of anger to spirit. You can't just catch a fever you've sinned, or perhaps someone wishes you harm. A young woman approaches the priest near the gate, clutching a bundle of herbs. She's been seeing shadows again, she says quietly. In the corners, the priest frowns. Burn the rosemary. Hang the cross over her bed. And no more stories after sundown. He blesses her, and she bows deeply before hurrying off. You realize that medicine and faith live in the same breath here. The apothecary's shop doubles as a shrine. A remedy is never complete without a prayer. Even ordinary acts, plowing, cooking, childbirth, begin with signs of the cross. The divine is not somewhere distant in the sky. It's right here, in every motion, every superstition, every whispered name of a saint. You stroll down the narrow path toward the river. The moonlight glimmers on the water, and the wind rustles through the reeds like whispered prayers. Somewhere nearby, you hear the rhythmic chants of monks from the monastery. Their voices rise and fall in perfect unison, echoing across the valley. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. It's eerie and peaceful all at once, like time itself has slowed to listen. The monastery looms in the distance, its stone arches lit faintly by lanterns. You push open the heavy gate and step into the cloister. Inside, everything is orderly, clean, and unnervingly quiet. The air smells of ink and wax. A monk glides past, his sandals barely whispering against the flagstones. He gives you a polite nod, his eyes tired but kind. You follow him into the scriptorium, a long, narrow room filled with rows of desks. Candles flicker beside piles of parchment. Monks bend over them, quills scratching steadily, copying sacred texts with infinite patience. You can hear the faint rasp of pen on skin, the sighs of concentration. One of the monks glances up and gestures for you to approach. His fingers are stained with ink, his beard flecked with crumbs. The word, he says softly, tapping the parchment, must be perfect. One mistake, and meaning dies. You nod, he smiles faintly. Better to break a bone than a verse. You watch as he paints an illuminated letter, swirl of gold and blue so intricate it seems to breathe. You can't help but admire the artistry. Yet, you also realize how isolating this world of perfection must be. To copy words written centuries ago, day after day, without ever adding a thought of your own, that's devotion beyond comprehension, or perhaps madness. Sometimes, you suspect the two are twins. As you leave the monastery, the night deepens. The sound of the monks chanting fades behind you, replaced by the hum of the forest. Fireflies drift lazily among the trees, tiny stars dancing close to the ground. You pass a small shrine tucked into the hillside, a weathered statue of the Virgin, her face soft even in the moonlight. Someone has left a bundle of wildflowers at her feet. You pause and whisper something, not quite a prayer, more like a hope. Maybe that's all a prayer really is. Further down the path, you meet a man carrying a wooden cross over his shoulder. His back is bent, his feet bare. He stops when he sees you. "Penance," he says, breathless. "For the drought." You nod solemnly, though the sky above is perfectly clear. In this world, faith isn't measured in belief, but in endurance. And yet, beneath all the piety, superstition thrives like ivy in the cracks of the church walls. You've already seen herbs burned for protection, charms hung in doorways, and whispered spells traded between grandmothers. The church frowns on such practices, but everyone knows someone who knows things. You remember the woman you met earlier? The one plucking feathers from a chicken. She mentioned she could read weather from smoke. People call her wise, sometimes witch, depending on the day. It's strange how the same act can be called holy or heretical, depending on who's watching. You make your way toward her cottage now, drawn by curiosity. It sits at the edge of the woods, surrounded by herbs strung from the eaves. The door is open just enough for the smell of sage and ash to slip out. Inside, the old woman stirs something in a clay pot. "Come in," she says, without turning. "You smell like questions." You grin. "I've been told worse." She chuckles, setting down her spoon. "The church teaches fear," she says. "I teach balance. Both have their uses." She shows you a bundle of herbs: rosemary for remembrance, rue for protection, and wormwood for courage. Faith needs roots, not just wings. You ask if she's ever afraid of being accused of witchcraft. Her eyes glint. Afraid. Always. But fear is like fire, it cooks your food if you keep it small. Her words stay with you as you leave. Maybe faith and superstition aren't enemies at all, just two languages trying to describe the same mystery. The night feels thicker now, the air cooler. You hear the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves. Somewhere in the village below, a dog barks once, twice, then falls silent. A candle flickers in a window, a single dot of defiance against the darkness. You stop to look back at the chapel on the hill. Steeple cuts against the stars, steady and unwavering. You think of all the prayers whispered inside those walls, for health, for rain, for forgiveness. Maybe some are answered, maybe not. But still, every night, the bells ring, and every morning, someone lights a candle again. Faith, you realize, is less about certainty and more about persistence. About believing in spite of everything, the cold, the hunger, the endless waiting. You can almost hear the unspoken prayers riding the wind, mingling with the smell of burning tallow and rain-soaked earth. And as you turn back toward the village, you murmur a small one of your own, for salvation, but for understanding. Because in a world this fragile, even doubt feels holy. The church bells have long since fallen silent, but their echo seems to cling to the air as you drift back toward the heart of the village. Tonight feels softer, less about faith, more about whispers. Somewhere in the distance, laughter rises and falls, mixed with the faint tune of a flute. If the chapel belongs to prayer, then the village square, right now, belongs to love and everything that tries to pretend it isn't. You find yourself outside a cottage where candlelight glows behind shuttered windows. The laughter inside is muffled, but lively. You catch the sweet scent of something baking honey. Maybe you hear the creak of a chair, the hush of voices lowering just a little too late. This is the side of medieval life that never made it into the illuminated manuscripts. Love, lust, and the quiet conspiracies of the heart. A young woman steps out, clutching a jug of ale and smiling faintly when she spots you. Her cheeks are flushed, not just from the cold. "You're out late," she says, raising an eyebrow. "Looking for company or confession?" You grin. "Depends who's asking." She laughs, shaking her head. "Then you'll fit right in." You follow her toward the square, where a small group of villagers has gathered beneath the old elm tree. Torches flicker, casting long shadows across faces bright with mischief. Someone plays a drum, another a flute, and in the center, couples twirl in a slow looping dance. The tune isn't refined, but it's alive, thrumming like a heartbeat. You can feel it in your ribs, In the Middle Ages, love isn't just personal, it's public theater. Every courtship is watched, whispered about, sometimes even negotiated like livestock. Still, people find their moments of rebellion. A shared glance across a marketplace, a ribbon tied around a wrist, a hand brushed accidentally in passing. In a world ruled by God and Lord alike, romance becomes a small act of defiance. You notice a boy barely 16 hovering near the edge of the dance. He's staring at a girl spinning in the firelight, her braid catching the glow like liquid gold. "Go on," someone urges him. "Ask her before the candles burn out." He shakes his head nervously. She's betrothed to the tanner's son. The man beside him snorts. "Then dance faster." You smile. Love in the medieval world may be bound by custom, but desire doesn't read contracts. Historians still argue whether courtly love, that poetic ideal of knights pining for unattainable ladies, was ever real or just a fancy excuse for flirtation. Watching this scene, you're convinced it was both. Poetry written with calloused hands and borrowed courage. The music changes faster now. The girl with the golden braid laughs as her partner spins her, skirts flying. The boy finally steps forward, caught between bravery and foolishness. You can't hear his words, but whatever he says makes her pause. Her smile softens. When she takes his hand, the crowd erupts into cheers. Someone tosses a sprig of rosemary into the air. It lands at their feet, a blessing for love, or maybe a warning to remember its bite. You drift toward a table where older villagers sit, sipping cider and pretending not to watch. "Ah," one of them says, nodding toward the new couple. "Young love worth every headache it brings." The woman beside him chuckles. "If only the church thought so." You raise an eyebrow. They don't. She leans closer. They prefer it signed, sealed, and supervised. Marriage here isn't about romance. It's about survival, alliance, and land. A union is less happily ever after and more mutual tax agreement. Parents arrange matches with the same logic they use to choose oxen. Strong, reliable, and hopefully not too stubborn. Yet, even within those bounds, affection sometimes grows. You've heard stories of couples who, despite it all, learn to love each other over shared bread and long winters. Still, not everyone gets a happy ending. Across the fire, a woman sits alone, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. You recognize her, a widow, perhaps 30 at most. In the Middle Ages, a woman like her walks a thin line. Too independent, and she's called suspicious. Too quiet, and she's invisible. She notices your glance and smiles faintly. "Don't look so sad," she says. "I've buried one husband and outlived 2 priests. I think I'm doing fine." You can't help but laugh, and she joins in. Humor here is survival, sharper than any sword. Later, the music softens again, and people begin drifting away, arm in arm, faces flushed with wine and warmth. The widow gathers her shawl and stands. "Watch yourself," she says kindly. The night has ears. You thank her, though you're not sure whether it's a blessing or a warning. As the crowd thins, you notice a figure lingering near the edge of the greenwood, drawn low, standing too still. For a moment, the firelight catches a glint of metal at his neck, a small cross. The priest, perhaps, keeping quiet watch over his flock or their sins. You can't quite tell whether his gaze is judgment or curiosity, maybe both. You head toward the tavern, where the laughter has resumed at full volume. Inside, the room glows with the amber warmth of fire and ale. A bard strums a lute in the corner, singing a tune that sounds equal parts prayer and confession. A knight rode far with heart untrue. A maid wept soft in morning dew. The priest forgave, the Lord forgot, but love, they say, remembers not. The crowd claps, coins clatter into a bowl, and someone shouts for another verse. You can't help but notice how easily the villagers switch between reverence and rebellion. They confess their sins on Sunday and sing about them by Tuesday. You respect the balance. At the bar, a man leans toward you. "You're new here," he says, voice thick with drink. "Want to know a secret?" You nod. "The baker's daughter," he whispers conspiratorially, "puts love charms in her bread. That's why half the village buys her loaves." You laugh, but he's deadly serious. "No joke. Ate 2 slices last week, and now my dog won't leave my side." You raise your cup in mock salute. "To love charms, then." He grins. "To survival." Outside, the night hums again, crickets. Distant laughter and the steady rhythm of human hearts pretending not to beat too fast. You wander through the narrow lanes, past the well, past the row of cottages where curtains flutter like secrets trying to escape. A door creaks open nearby. You catch a glimpse of a young couple inside, bare feet, tangled in blankets, candlelight painting gold across their faces. You turn away, smiling. For all its rules, the medieval world still makes room for stolen moments like this, fragile, foolish, and entirely human. As you walk, you recall a superstition someone mentioned earlier, that if you dream of your true love on St. Agnes's Eve, you'll see their face before midnight. You glance up at the stars, wondering how many people tonight are trying that very thing. Whispering prayers into the dark, clutching tokens, herbs, or ribbons, as if love itself could be summoned like rain. At the edge of the village, you stumble upon a small wooden bridge, half hidden by fog. Beneath it, the river glimmers faintly. A girl stands there, scattering flower petals onto the water. "For luck," she says without looking up. "For love, you ask if it works." She smiles sadly. "Sometimes." But the river takes what it wants. Then she's gone, vanishing into the mist as quietly as she appeared. You linger a while longer, listening to the soft rush of the current. It reminds you that everything here, faith, labor, love, flows in cycles. Marriages are made, vows are broken, hearts heal, and still the world turns. There's beauty in that inevitability, a kind of peace that only comes from knowing you don't control the tide. As you head back toward the square, the fires have burned low, leaving only embers. You can hear distant footsteps and the occasional echo of laughter. Somewhere, a dog howls, whether in longing or loneliness, you can't tell. The stars are cold and brilliant above, ancient witnesses to every secret this village has ever kept. And as you finally reach the quiet of your small straw bed, you realize that love in the medieval world isn't a fairy tale, it's a survival story. It's whispered promises in the dark, shared warmth in the cold, and the simple, stubborn act of believing that tomorrow might still hold something kind. You pull the blanket tighter, listening to the faint murmur of the night beyond your door. The world outside is full of sin, song, and second chances. And somewhere out there, a candle still burns for love, for longing, or maybe just for light. Morning has barely begun, but the village already smells like sickness. You notice it the moment you step outside, the faint temps of smoke, vinegar, and something metallic beneath it all. A crow perches on the roof of the apothecary's shop, watching as you pass beneath its shadow. The sign creaks in the wind, a painted mortar and pestle chipped at the edges. You push open the door, and the scent inside is overwhelming: herbs, dried flowers, wax, honey, and something less pleasant, like boiled roots that have forgotten their purpose. The apothecary himself looks up from his bench, a thin man with ink-stained fingers and the faintly haunted eyes of someone who knows too much. "Don't touch anything," he warns, "though you haven't moved. Half of it heals, half of it kills, and I can never quite remember which half is which." You laugh nervously. "Comforting." He smirks. "You want comfort? Talk to the priest. You want results? Talk to me." You look around. Shelves are stacked with jars, some neatly labeled in Latin, others with symbols that might be guesses. Powdered bark, dried snakes, lumps of ambergris. There's even a jar labeled mumia. You stare at it. "Is that?" He nods. "Ground mummy from Egypt. It's a very fashionable remedy for headaches and heartbreaks alike." You hesitate. "Does it work?" He shrugs. "Historians still argue whether it ever did." In the Middle Ages, medicine is a tangled web of hope, habit, and the occasional miracle. Real science exists, but it's buried under layers of superstition and tradition thicker than any bandage. Physicians quote Galen and Hippocrates, monks copy their words without understanding, and peasants rely on whatever grows nearby, or whatever smells least like death. The apothecary picks up a vial filled with cloudy liquid. This, he says proudly, is distilled wormwood. Good for the stomach, bad for demons. You raise an eyebrow? Demons. He nods solemnly. Half my patients are human. The rest, I'm told, are not. Outside, the street is busy. A woman shouts about healing charms. Another sells garlic garlands to ward off illness. You spot a beggar sitting near the church steps, coughing into his cloak. People skirt around him as if his shadow might carry contagion. It's not fear of a single disease, fear of all of them. Fevers, fluxes, coughs, the sweating sickness, the falling evil. The human body is a battlefield no one fully understands. And when the worst comes, the plague you don't need a bell to tell you. The silence does it for you. You remember the stories, the Black Death sweeping across continents, filling graves faster than they could be dug, entire towns abandoned, cats blamed, Jews blamed, air itself blamed. You can't quite imagine the horror, but the whispers remain. Every cough in this village carries a little echo of that memory. A man approaches the apothecary's door, holding a small child wrapped in a faded blanket. The boy's face is pale, lips blue. He hasn't eaten in 2 days, the man says, voice breaking. The apothecary takes the child gently, checking his pulse with surprising tenderness. Too much cold in the humors, he mutters. We'll try to balance him. You watch as he mixes honey, vinegar, and powdered ginger. The father looks hopeful. Will it work? The apothecary hesitates just long enough for you to notice. It will ease him, he says finally. It's not the same thing. Medicine here is less about cure and more about comfort. The body is seen as a fragile balance of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it means one has gone rogue. So the cure. Balance it again. How? With leeches, purges, bleeding, or prayers, whichever is closest at hand. You step outside again, air thick with the smell of smoke. A woman is burning rosemary in her doorway, muttering under her breath. Keeps the bad air out, she says when she catches your eye. Plague rides on smells. Everyone knows that. She waves the smoke toward you, grinning. Don't want to catch the night cough, do you? You wave back politely, not sure whether to laugh or hold your breath. Farther down the lane, the village healer woman with a reputation somewhere between saint and witch tends to her patients beneath a chestnut tree. Her tools are simpler: herbs, touch, and words whispered so softly they might be spells. Come closer, she tells a farmer, clutching his arm. Show me the bite. He obeys. Wolf, he says grimly. She nods, sprinkles powdered yarrow, and murmurs something about moonlight. People trust her more than the physicians in their long robes. Maybe because she lives among them. Maybe because, unlike the learned men, she doesn't charge in Latin. You ask if she's ever been accused of witchcraft. She smiles. Twice, you blink. How did you escape? Her grin widens. They got sick before they could catch me. You can't tell if she's joking. She invites you to taste a strange brew from her cauldron. Good for the blood, she says. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like overcooked spinach with a hint of regret. Delicious, you lie. She laughs. You'll live longer for the compliment. Still, not every healer is harmless. Some promise miracles they can't deliver. Snake oil, ass. That's not just a phrase, it's an export. Dried vipers, ground and mixed with oil, sold as a tonic for strength. Strong like the serpent, the sellers claim. You suspect they meant slimy like the seller. At the monastery infirmary, medicine wears a different face. Monks move quietly between rows of beds, whispering prayers and adjusting bandages. The air smells of wax and thyme. Their remedies come from ancient texts copied in careful Latin, recipes for poultices, syrups, and ointments. They believe healing is a divine act, not a human one. If a patient recovers, God gets the credit. If not, well, God knows best. A young monk stops beside you. "We do what we can," he says softly, "but sometimes mercy means letting go." You glance toward a dying man muttering psalms, his hands clutching a small wooden cross. "Doesn't that frighten you?" you ask. The monk shakes his head. "No, it reminds me that faith is stronger than fear." You walk through the infirmary, listening to the low hum of prayer. One patient insists he's been cured by a saint's bone. Another swears by a charm tied with red thread. A third simply sleeps, pale but peaceful. Science and superstition share the same bed here. Neither seems eager to get up first. By afternoon, the air grows warmer, heavy with flies. Outside, a man walks by carrying a wheelbarrow of old rags and herbs, shouting, "Leeches! Fresh leeches!" You stop him. People actually buy those. He grins, revealing several missing teeth. Of course, best for balancing the blood. One bite and you'll feel lighter. You resist the urge to ask whether that's because you're losing blood. There's a strange kind of logic here. Pain is proof that the cure is working. Suffering means the soul is cleansing. You can't quite decide whether it's faith or fatalism, but you admire their endurance either way. By dusk, the healer under the chestnut tree is packing up her herbs. You sit beside her as she ties bundles of lavender. "You've seen both worlds today," she says quietly. "The apothecary's jars and the monk's prayers. Which do you trust?" You think for a moment. "Neither." "Both." She nods approvingly. Good answer. Wisdom lives in the space between. A bell rings in the distance. Someone has died. It's not mournful. Exactly. Just matter of fact. Life here ends as it begins, with ceremony and soil. You follow the sound toward the edge of the village, where a small group gathers around a grave. The priest murmurs blessings. The widow weeps softly, and the gravedigger waits, shovel ready. There's no fear in their faces. Death isn't an interruption, it's a neighbor. You watch as the last handful of earth falls, and you can't help but think how fragile it all is. The body, the cure, the hope. And yet somehow, life keeps going. As you walk back through the quiet lanes, the smell of rosemary lingers. Someone's cooking stew. Someone else coughs behind a shuttered window. The apothecary's lamp still burns faintly in the distance. Inside, he's probably labeling a new jar, mixing another uncertain miracle. You imagine him muttering, half heals, half kills, and smiling to himself. You realize, as you reach your door, that every age believes it understands life and death. The Middle Ages just had the honesty to admit it never truly did. The night returns with a softness that feels almost forgiving. The streets are quieter, now merchants calling. No children chasing geese, just the sigh of wind between shutters and the faint rustle of straw underfoot. You wander toward the center of the village, drawn by the glow of firelight. There's something magnetic about that warm orange flicker, especially in a world ruled by darkness once the sun goes down. You reach a cluster of cottages where villagers have gathered around a great hearth built outdoors. Sparks dance into the air like tiny stars, vanishing before they touch the thatch roofs. Someone throws another log on, and the flames leap higher. A pot of broth simmers nearby, rich with onions and herbs. The smell makes your stomach rumble, even though you already ate. "Come, sit," an old man calls, waving you over. His beard glows copper in the firelight. The night's long and we've stories to burn through. You settle beside him, feeling the heat on your face and the chill still clinging to your back. It's the perfect balance, the sort of comfort that feels ancient and earned. The villagers murmur softly, sharing gossip and laughter. The ale is flowing again, though slower now, each sip measured like a small ritual. The old man nods toward a group of children sitting wide-eyed across the fire. "They're waiting for the ghosts," he whispers. "They always are." You raise an eyebrow. "Ghosts?" He grins, teeth glinting. "You think this village empties itself at night because we're tired?" No, no. The dead walk when they please, and it's best to keep them entertained. He leans closer, so we tell stories. Keeps them listening instead of knocking. He's joking mostly. But the way the children glance at the shadows, you can tell they half believe him. In a time when darkness means danger, every creak in the rafters feels like a spirit stretching its bones. A woman begins the first story, voice low and rhythmic. There once was a miller who cheated his customers by daylight and was haunted by night. The tailwinds on windmills spinning by themselves. Sacks of grain whispering confessions. A ghostly horse that appears at his door to drag him to judgment. When she finishes, the fire crackles louder, as if applauding. You can't help smiling. Storytelling is their television, their therapy, their newsfeed and lullaby rolled into one. It's how they pass wisdom, warn children, and flirt without admitting it. Every tale holds a moral wrapped in mystery. Don't cheat, don't stray, don't wander alone after dark. Someone else takes up a lute and plucks a few soft notes. The melody is simple but haunting, and soon a few voices hum along. The music swells, low and warm, like the heartbeat of the village itself. You close your eyes and listen the rhythm of crackling logs, the rise and fall of breath, the small laughter between verses. There's a kind of safety here that doesn't come from walls or guards. It comes from togetherness, from shared warmth and the illusion that no harm can reach you as long as you face it as one. A boy suddenly jumps up, pointing toward the woods. Did you see that? Everyone stills. The fire pops sharply. For a heartbeat, you think you do see something, a figure between the trees, pale and silent. Then it's gone. The old man chuckles. Relax. That's just old Ren scaring you from the afterlife again. Nervous laughter ripples through the group. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in ghosts or simply found comfort in pretending they did. Either way, the line between the living and the dead feels thinner tonight. The talk drifts to omens and dreams. A young woman swears she saw a black dog in her doorway at dusk. A sign of death, she insists. An older man shakes his head. Nonsense. It just means someone's stealing your chickens. The group laughs again, the tension broken. Someone ladles you a bowl of broth. It's simple but perfect, warm, savory, alive with the taste of firewood and patience. You sip slowly, feeling the heat spread through you. You city folk, the woman beside you says, grinning. You think you know comfort because you've got feather beds. But here, comfort's a bowl of stew and a story that ends before dawn. You nod. She's right. As the night deepens, the stories turn stranger. Someone speaks of Willow, the wisps dancing over the marsh, luring travelers to their doom. Another tells of a hermit who could heal any wound but stole a year of life for every cure. These tales are equal parts fear and fascination, drawn from a world where the unknown isn't an idea, it's the next hill over. A soft voice joins from the edge of the group, a woman singing in a dialect so old it sounds like another language. The melody rises and falls like the tide. The lyrics, someone whispers, are a prayer for protection. Even the children go still. The sound wraps around you, gentle but unyielding, like a mother's hand on a fevered brow. When the song ends, the old man leans closer to you again. See, he says, we don't light these fires just for warmth. Fire keeps the shadows honest. He pokes the embers with a stick, sending a spray of sparks upward. And in a world this dark, honesty is a miracle. You think of how precious every candle must be here. Beeswax costs more than most people earn in a week, so tallow candles, greasy, smoky, cheap, do the job instead. Yet they still burn them gladly, because darkness feels alive in the worst way when left unchecked. A group of young men begins to play dice near the fire. They laugh loudly, slapping the ground, accusing each other of cheating. The stakes are modest bread, a wooden cup, maybe a half-day's wages, but the energy is real. Gambling's technically frowned upon by the church, but out here, the priest is already asleep, and even saints need their sinners. You join them for a round. Your first throw wins, the second loses. Luck's a wheel, one of them says sagely. Sometimes you're on top, sometimes you're underneath it. He grins, usually underneath it. Further back, a woman mends a torn tunic by candlelight while listening to the chatter. The needle flashes like a tiny star. Her daughter dozes beside her, head against her lap. There's tenderness, here unspoken but constant. Every gesture feels like an anchor in a life ruled by uncertainty. You hear the curfew bell ring in the distance, a dull, echoing note rolling over the rooftops. It means lights out, fires low, doors barred. The law of the night isn't cruel, just cautious. Bandits, wolves, or worse none, are welcome after dark. People begin to scatter, gathering their children, dousing torches, whispering goodnights. The old man pats your shoulder. If you hear scratching at the shutters, he says, "Don't open them." Could be the wind, could be something that remembers your name. You grin. "You're trying to make sure I don't sleep." He chuckles. Exactly. The fire dwindles as you walk away, casting only faint light on the muddy lane ahead. Your boots crunch on frozen earth. The stars are bright, cold, endless. Somewhere, an owl hoots. Somewhere else, a door creaks shut with finality. You reach your small hut at the edge of the village. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke and straw. You light your single candle and watch its flame tremble, painting shadows on the wall that almost move like people. You can't help but think of the stories you've just heard: the ghosts, the willow, the wisps, the miller, and his horse. You tell yourself they're just stories. But then again, in a world where medicine bleeds you to heal you, where relics cure disease, and where prayers are traded like coins, maybe belief is the truest medicine of all. You sit by the hearth, stirring the last embers. The glow fades slowly, and the room cools around you. Outside, the village has gone still. No laughter now, no clatter. Just breathing hundreds of quiet sleepers, sharing the same fragile peace. You lie down on your straw mattress, pulling your rough wool blanket to your chin. It smells faintly of ash and lavender. Your mind drifts between wake and dream, still hearing the rhythm of the fire from earlier, still seeing the sparks rise and vanish. And somewhere, maybe just outside your door, you imagine that pale figure again, watching, listening, maybe smiling. You decide not to look. Some mysteries are better left unconfirmed. The wind sighs through the cracks in the shutters. The candle gutters, then dies. In the dark, your heartbeat feels like part of the night itself. Tomorrow, you'll wake 2 bells again. But for now, you let the dark have you, just a little. It's not cruel, it's ancient, familiar, and full of stories waiting to be told. Dawn creeps slowly over the horizon, spilling pale light across the rooftops and misted fields. You step outside, brushing dew from your tunic, and breathe in the crisp air. The village is waking. Smoke curls from chimneys, roosters crow from every farmyard, and the river glints like a silver ribbon threading through the mist. Already, the world feels alive again, despite its hardships. You wander down the cobbled lane, passing familiar faces. A baker carries a tray of steaming bread, nodding as you pass. The apothecary sweeps the front of his shop, his eyes flicking to the sky as if measuring the day for hidden omens. Even the widow from the square yesterday is outside, sweeping leaves from her doorway. Her movements deliberate, patient, ritualistic. The village has a rhythm, a pulse that you can feel in the soles of your feet. People rise, work, pray, eat, love, and sleep in patterns that repeat like the turning of seasons. It's deceptively simple, yet utterly complex a society balanced on the tiniest margins of survival, belief, and habit. You reach the river, where a few villagers are already washing clothes or rinsing pots. Water rushes past in clear, relentless flow. A boy splashes playfully, shrieking as the cold bites at his skin. You notice the undertow of labor here. Every moment is practical. Every action serves multiple purposes. The river cleanses clothes, cools the body, and sustains life. It is mundane, yet miraculous, a reminder that necessity often births ingenuity. Near the riverbank, an old man mends a fishing net. His hands are gnarled, veins visible beneath pale skin. Each knot is precise, measured, and deliberate, as though misplacing even one might unravel more than the net itself. You ask if he's teaching someone? He shakes his head. Patience and repetition teach better than words. The river will test them soon enough. Indeed, the river is both ally and adversary. It feeds livestock, powers mills, and provides fish. But it also floods, erodes, and can drown without warning. Villagers respect it, fear it, and, when necessary, bargain with it. In the Middle Ages, every natural element carries a dual identity, friend and foe. You can trust it, but never blindly. You continue your walk, entering the market square as merchants begin setting up stalls. The scents of spices, bread, and dried meat intermingle with less pleasant odors. Unwashed wool, livestock, and faintly rot. Vendors shout, bargain, and demonstrate wares, a mix of ritual and theater. Every call is designed to attract attention. Every gesture calculated to win trust or, at least, curiosity. A woman sells pottery, her hands expertly turning clay as she talks to potential buyers. A young man displays knives, polished and sharp, catching the early sunlight. Children run between the stalls, chasing each other and stealing fruit when their elders aren't looking. You notice a man selling charmsteiny pouches tied with red and green thread. He winks at you. Protection, he says simply. You nod, remembering the rosemary burned last night. Life here is lived in layers. The surface is daily labor, trade, and socialization. Beneath that lies faith, superstition, and a keen understanding of risk. The mundane and the mystical intertwined seamlessly. No one questions the oddities, they simply incorporate them. You might witness a prayer whispered over a loaf of bread or a charm tucked beneath a sleeping child. Everything is practical and symbolic at once. A group gathers near the well, drawing water for the day. You hear gossip drifting on the breeze. Someone's cow has calved twins. A merchant cheated a customer. The priest has a headache. The tales are minor, trivial to an outsider, but here, each story carries weight. Their information, warning, and entertainment all at once. Even small news has its ripple effect. You move on to the carpenter's workshop. The smell of sawdust and resin fills the air. A young apprentice hammers nails into a chair under the watchful eye of a master. Every strike is deliberate, measured, intentional. The master's hands guide the apprentice, correcting, adjusting, ensuring precision. Skill is precious, passed carefully from one generation to the next. A poorly made chair isn't just inconvenient, reflects poorly on the maker and the household. A scholar might call this social cohesion. You just call it survival. Every craft, every trade, every ritual has a purpose beyond itself. It binds the village together, creates interdependence, and stabilizes life amid unpredictability. You start to see the invisible web: faith, superstition, labor, love, and play all interwoven into a single living organism. You pause by the blacksmith's forge. Sparks fly as hammer meets iron, sending showers of orange against the dark stone walls. The heat is almost unbearable, yet necessary. Weapons, tools, horseshoes, all vital. The blacksmith's face is streaked with soot, eyes narrowed, lips pressed in concentration. You wonder if he enjoys this work? Perhaps, perhaps not. You can't ask. Some passions are silent, expressed only in sparks and sweat. Nearby, a woman walks with a basket of herbs. She's going to the healer, perhaps to trade or to prepare remedies for the village. Each plant she carries is chosen carefully. Chamomile for sleep, sage for protection, lavender for scent. Even the mundane has layered meaning. Historians still argue whether herbal knowledge was rooted in superstition or proto-science. But here, it doesn't matter. It works, or at least it helps, and that is enough. You make your way to the edge of the fields, where farmers bend beneath the weight of winter crops, pruning, feeding, and tending. Their movements are rhythmic, almost meditative. They rise with the sun, work through frost and rain, and rest only when night falls again. Labor is not optional. It is a matter of survival, a delicate balance between hunger and plenty. You admire their endurance, their quiet resilience, and the way every small act contributes to the larger whole. Above, the sky begins to clear, sunlight glinting on frost-crusted hedgerows. You see the village from a slight rise, the layout clear. Cottages clustered near the square, fields stretching outward. The river looping around the settlement like a silver ribbon. Life here is raw, yet organized, messy, yet structured. Every stone, every path, every roof tells a story of adaptation, perseverance, and subtle human ingenuity. You pause to watch a child chase a chicken across the yard. The bird flaps, squawks, and escapes under a cart. The child shrieks, laughter spilling from him in rich, infectious waves. Even in hardship, moments of joy exist, fleeting but real. The villagers treasure them, as you can see from the way smiles appear at odd moments. A bright defiance against a world that rarely pauses. By mid-morning, you find yourself at the square again. The market is in full swing. Merchants shout, children beg, and tradespeople conduct delicate negotiations. You notice subtle social codes: who speaks first, who yields space, who gets priority. These unspoken rules are as vital as any law written on parchment. They ensure coexistence in a community packed tightly together, where mistakes have consequences beyond embarrassment. The day continues, flowing like the river you passed earlier. Tasks repeat, children play, songs are sung, prayers are whispered. You realize that in this hidden world of everyday medieval life, nothing exists in isolation. Every act, whether small or grand, mundane or sacred, contributes to the rhythm of survival. There is no separation between ordinary and extraordinary. It's all a single living narrative. You stop for a moment on the edge of the village, looking back. Smoke rises from chimneys. Livestock graze in pens. People move like threads in a tapestry you cannot fully trace. It's imperfect, fragile, often frightening, but it endures. That's the secret. Resilience is woven into the very fabric of this life. Not heroics, not wealth, not power, but persistence, community, and the quiet determination to keep going day after day, season after season. And as the sun climbs higher, spilling light across stone and soil, you take a deep breath and understand, finally, what makes this hidden world remarkable. It's ordinary life, yes, but lived with such intensity, attention, and subtle ingenuity that centuries later, we still marvel. Every face, every gesture, every breath is part of the story. Every meal shared, every prayer uttered, every whispered love and stolen glance is a thread in the human tapestry. You walk back toward your dwelling as the village hums around you, the rhythm of existence steady, reassuring. The market shouts fade slightly as trades conclude. Children wander toward home, and the labor of the day begins to claim attention. You pause one last time and breathe deeply, tasting the crisp air, smelling smoke, herbs, and earth, feeling both foreign and intimately part of this ancient rhythm. This is the hidden world of medieval life, a mixture of work, faith, superstition, love, and endurance. Ordinary, yet extraordinary. Fragile, yet resilient. Difficult, yet beautifully human. You step inside, the warmth of your straw bed calling. Even as you settle, the village continues its life around you. Bells chime, birds sing, rivers flow. Every heartbeat, every sigh, every step of a villager's foot becomes a whisper of persistence. The world is alive, and in its subtle rhythms, you find the comfort of continuity, the beauty of survival, and the quiet triumph of ordinary people living extraordinary lives.